The idea of bringing Mashiach is really dir b'tachtainim. It's just making a home for Hashem, and we're actually learning it. We're actually learning it now in Tanya. That's the whole Tanya now. It's all about the balance between learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. So, why do we do mitzvahs? And we do mitzvahs in order to make a dir b'tachtainim. But at some point, we make a dir b'tachtainim. And then when we make the dir b'tachtainim, what's the point of mitzvahs? So obviously, and that's the whole question of whether mitzvahs b'telas l'asad, whether mitzvahs will continue when Mashiach comes or not. Because if the mitzvah is for a purpose, well, once you accomplish the purpose, then you don't need the mitzvah anymore. But as the Rebbe explains, that there's obviously we're not stopping to do mitzvahs. When Mashiach comes, we're going to stop needing to be obligated to do a mitzvah, because the obligation is only necessary when the person who's doing the mitzvah is not naturally inclined to do the mitzvah. In other words, when there's a separation between you and the Eibishter, then you need a mitzvah in order to do it. But once there's no separation, then you naturally are going to do the mitzvah. So the mitzvahs are, so dir b'tachtainim is really kind of the short reason, or the temporary reason for why we're doing mitzvahs. But dir b'tachtainim is created in two ways. One way is through doing mitzvahs, and the other way is through learning Torah. Why? Because there's the dira itself, and that's the physical home in which you are going to live. But then there is the person who's living in the home. So the Eibishter doesn't want to have a home by himself. He didn't say, I want a dira, I want you to build me a suite down in this place. So when I come down to planet Earth, I'll have a nice place to hang out. That's not what the Eibishter said. The Eibishter said, no, dira, make a vishlachanti b'seicham. The point is, we're going to be in this dira together. So when we do a mitzvah, we affect the physical world. We bring Ur Ein Sof into this physical world, and we reveal it in a way that, in a sense, the Eibishter can't even reveal it himself. I don't know if I want to get into that rabbit hole. We can do that, but in other words, we're accomplishing something that can't be accomplished in any other way except through us, and that's because of our bechira. And so we are able to make this physical world a place where that Hashem will be able to reveal Himself, and the world won't lose its being a world. In other words, it remains a tachten, and the Eibishter can reveal Himself in that space, in that tachten space. And how do you do that? You do that through a mitzvah. In other words, mitzvahs is what accomplishes it. Torah doesn't accomplish it that much. So what does Torah accomplish? Torah accomplishes that you, the Yid, wants to be in that dira with the Eibishter, because it's a mind space. It's special that I want to be with the Eibishter. So I want to do something for the Eibishter, but then I want to be with the Eibishter. So it's much more intimate, and it's much more personal, that I think like the Eibishter. I understand the Eibishter. In other words, and then the Eibishter can reveal Himself in me. In other words, what happened by Matan Torah? Matan Torah, the Eibishter came and He blew our brains, He blew our minds. In other words, he tried to reveal Himself, He tried to open Himself up to us, but the tachten then stopped being a tachten, because we just stopped being, we just merged with the Eibishter. So now the Rebbe explains to us that through Limud Torah, we're going to be a keli, that when the Eibishter finally does reveal Atzmusay Musay, that we will be able to handle it. And it's going to be different when it so it says V'ro kol basar yachdav v'yeshem diber. True, everybody's going to be able to see it, but there's going to be a difference. There's a difference between the way Yidden are going to experience it and the way the Goyim are going to experience it. So there is going to be a significant qualitative difference in the way we relate to the Eibishter and the way the Eibishter and the way the rest of the world relates to the Eibishter. So although you can't give any definitions to a gilui of etzem, because a gilui of etzem means it's beyond any limitations. It truly is the etzem, but at the same time, what the etzem wants and what the etzem connects to is different. And so therefore, what Yidden are going to experience is going to be different than everybody else experiences. So that idea that we're going to understand what the Eibishter wants from us and what the Eibishter's connection to us, how does that happen? How do we prepare ourselves for Mashiach? How do you prepare yourself for Mashiach? In other words, you prepare the world through doing mitzvahs. How do you prepare yourself? How do you start to think properly? How do you start to think like a Mashiach mindset? Only you have to learn Torah. You first have to learn. You have to learn. It has to become who you are. You have to first understand Chassidus in a real way. You have to internalize it. You have to personalize it. It has to become you. Then you're a dida for the Eibishter. In other words, then you didn't just make the world a dida. There's someone who wants to be in that dida with the Eibishter. So, that to me is the same thing. Like how do you treat your children? How do you treat the people around you? How do we treat them? So if you haven't mastered that area, so then there's an area of you that isn't thinking like the Eibishter. You're not thinking. If you want to think about it like the Rebbe. The Rebbe was like the perfect on every level. He managed to balance everything together. He was strict when he needed to be strict. He was kind when he needed to be kind. Balancing the whole thing out. Most of us are completely unbalanced. We're good at something. We're not good at everything. And part of the world around us, how do we know how we're out of balance? We know we're out of balance when the world around us isn't exactly functioning the way it's supposed to be functioning, including myself. I know myself I'm out of balance. I'm not functioning. I know I'm supposed to be functioning. So it's balancing all of that out. And so when we talk about Mashiach, there's Mashiach as a segula, which is you do something that's just going to bring Mashiach. You're going to say an extra kapitel Tehillim. We're all going to say it at exactly the same time, and boom, something magical happens, and a qualitative change transforms the entire world, and boom, we moved on to a new stage. That's one thing, and the Rebbe was certainly all for that. I mean, the Rambam says it clearly that your one ma'isa achas, libur achas, machshava achas, it changes the whole world. So that's one side of it. Therefore, you should never turn down any. Never put down anything, because you never know. That might be the one thing that we're waiting for. On the other hand, it's when we understand the reason of Golus, we understand what we can do to bring Mashiach. In other words, if the cause of Golus is because of sinas chinam, well then avas chinam is going to bring it. In other words, so there's a direct correlation between what it is we're trying to do and what it is that we're accomplishing. They're not disconnected. It's like ma'aseinu va'avodaseinu. It's avoida through ibud eires, through actually changing ourselves, through making that change, we actually make it happen. And so the Rebbe told us that the world is ready. In other words, we have affected the physical part of the world is ready to receive it. But the problem is we're not ready. Meaning, obviously, the world is ready, but each individual person is still stuck in their own golus pnimi, whatever it is, and therefore you have to open your eyes, meaning you got to do something. In other words, preparing yourself we're not getting the world ready, and so that's kind of the idea of how do we get the world ready is by living. If you're not ready, if you're not living it, if you're not understanding it, if it's not becoming a part of your life, then it's again back to segulas. It's back to mitzvahs. Torah is you change, you become what it is that Mashiach is. So that's my thought on it and that's why when you see the mental health breakdown in our own communities and so on, where they're calling out and they're asking for help, and I'm going to switch here and tie this in. So one of the things that the Rebbe talks about, it's in I think it's in Akev, I think it's Chela Chavdalet. I should have brought it here. Where the Rebbe talks about what it means that we are a Am Segula. that we are a segula for Am segula. What does a segula mean? And Rashi says that a segula means that we are a that we're a gonos, we're a oitzer gonos, we're precious and we're hidden. And the Rebbe asks, what's the point of if you have an oitzer, why do you hide it? In other words, what's the point of hiding us as a we're his segula, he hides us away. And the way the Rebbe explains it is that what it means to be a segula means that you are not utilitarian, you are not for any use. It's simply because of who you are. That's what the Eibishter wants. He wants you and not anything from you. And so then the Rebbe asks, but 1 second, it says, Ani lo nivresi elo l'shamish eskaini. It's in a ha'ara on the bottom. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing ha'ara, right? Ani nivresi l'shamish eskaini. 1 second, we were created, we are utilitarian, we are useful. And the Rebbe's answer, unbelievable. What is the Rebbe's answer? That's in Bria. Ani nivresi. In Bria, on a lower level, yeah, we do serve a function. In other words, if you understand the way, if you understand Chassidus, you understand the whole thing. There's when we say that mitzvahs are to make a dir b'tachtonim, we're not talking about the etzem of mitzvahs. Even though the Alter Rebbe says that the whole tachlis, but he doesn't mean that that's the whole tachlis. Even when he says because he says it in other places, he says the opposite. So it means in this context, I'm trying to explain it to the people I'm studying with. In this context, it's only for this thing, but it's not only. There's something much deeper, which is why we're going to do mitzvahs when Mashiach comes. So when you say that Bria is, yes, of course there is Bria, but in Atzilus, when you go higher, no. So the idea that we are L'shamish Eskaini is a lower madrega. I mean, this is, I don't know, for me it was mind-blowing. Then in the next ha'ara, I think on the next page, the Rebbe says, for 1 second, how about aren't we supposed to make a dir b'tachtonim? We're utilitarian. We're here to make Hashem a dir b'tachtonim. We're again, there's some kind of utilitarian. So the Rebbe says, no. The point is, the dira is for us. We're not building the dira for the Eibishter. The dira is for us and Hashem. Mamish, unbelievable. So the point of the sikha, again, to me, and how it relates back to the mental health is the idea is that the Mashiach element, the Mashiach aspect is that the whole dira b'tachtonim, the whole idea is it's embracing the person, it's embracing the full human being, and the mental health, and the loneliness that Mendel alluded to earlier, and the mental health issues that we have in our communities and we have in our families and so on, all go back to this idea of people need to know and feel that they are unconditionally loved and appreciated and accepted and connected with their family. I mean, this is some radical ideas. You think that people are very controversial ideas, but this is so basic to Chassidus. It's so basic to we just get a little bent out of shape. So the idea to me, the connection to mental health is that we're not utilitarian. Our children are not utilitarian. We are not utilitarian, and this is what our generation needs. This is where we're at. We're at the saf hagula. We're mamish at the edge, and this is where we're at. We're at the point where I made a joke about it, but it says that when Mashiach, I when I really learned that sikha where the Rebbe talks about the mitzvah b'telas lasad lavai or ena b'telas lasad lavai. So when I don't know, when I learned it at the time, I didn't chap it, but when I finally chapped it, that it was that the Rebbe is saying that basically the Eibishter is taking away the tzivui. Pasha takes away the tzivui. We will not have an tzivui, and therefore the Rebbe explains the Pasha al Pinigla that therefore you could bury somebody in tachrichim that are shatnez. Why? Because the moment you wake up after the Tchiyas HaMesim, you don't have any obligation. There's no obligation to there's no mitzvah. There's no mitzvah on you. And therefore, you don't have a responsibility. What's going to happen is automatically you're going to want to do it. automatically the world is going to want to do it, and therefore miraculously somehow your shatnez is going to turn into not being shatnez. The wool and the linen are going to automatically separate. Or I don't know what's going to happen exactly, but the point is you won't have the mitzvah anymore. And I was like, I made a joke about it. I was like, this is mamish how people already feel. People already feel that they're already living in the time of Mashiach. The Pasha don't feel the obligation of the mitzvah anymore. And that's the idea. When you go to a fry, to someone on the street, you say, would you like to put on tefillin? He doesn't for 1 second think about some do if they have guilt and if they're have a history of guilt. But most people you go over to, you say put on tefillin, they're not thinking about the mitzvah part. They're not thinking about the tzibui. You have an obligation to put on mitzvahs, to put on tefillin. They're doing it because Abishter needs me to put on the tefillin. Okay, fine, I'll put on it. His mom is doing it already in a Mashiach way. In other words, that's the Mashiach way. So we have to change our whole way of thinking, and therefore everything we do becomes this changes this way. And so therefore the way we treat our children is not like, oh, we're Nebuch, we have to Nebuch give in to Nebuch Elam Haza Agashmi, we have to give in to the fact, and therefore we have to treat our children with unconditional love, and we have to treat them all these things. No. This is not backwards. This is actually forward. We're moving forward. We move beyond that to the point where we're a segula. We're taka segula. Please don't treat a yid chas v'shalom that he's anything less than a segula. He is not utilitarian. He is not needed for anything. He is needed because Hashem wants a dira with him, with the yid. That's who's the most important, not his mitzvah. His mitzvah. Obviously, he's going to do the mitzvah, but it's that it's the mindset, and therefore the whole language has to change. We're changing the language in our own minds. I have to do it to myself, and I'm still working on it. But I have to rewire my brain to think, because I have been not raised in a Mashiach world. That's not the way I was raised. Even though I was told Mashiach is coming, no one explained this to me and set this up in my brain to think Mashiach minded, Mashiach wise, to think along those lines. And so that to me is the idea. So I've spoken for a long time, and I'll just be quiet now. So I see people on Sicha, I'll go find it and give it to Mendy, and he'll post it on the group.
Rabbi Marcus, to your point, I heard a nice vart from Yossi Paltiel, a short vart. The Rebbe's 11th pasuk, V'zeh kol Adam. So in Tanya, it says the words V'zeh kol Adam 3 times. Once in Perek Yud Zayin, once in Lamed Gimel, and once in Lamed Zayin. So Yud Zayin is a different topic, but Lamed Gimel and Lamed Zayin is almost word for word. That Kol Adam and Tachas B'riyasa is to make a der b'tachtenim. But the context is different. In Lamed Gimel, the Alter Rebbe is talking about Limud HaTorah. Lamed Zayin, the Alter Rebbe is talking about Kiyum HaMitzvahs and der b'tachtenim in the way, especially in the Rebbe's Torahs of how every mitzvah matters, and mitzvah's maisius. So Yosef Patil asks a question. The Rebbe, who is the big champion for mitzvah's maisius, why is he using Lamed Gimel as the marker for, in other words, because the words are a little bit different. So the exact words that the Rebbe chose was for Perek Lamed Gimel, not Lamed Zayin. L'chayra, the Rebbe should have chosen V'zeh kol Adam to be the Lamed Zayin one, the Mitzvah's Maisius one. Why Limud HaTorah one? Now, he doesn't really give a satisfactory answer. He says, I have a few ideas. He doesn't really give an answer. But I think, to your point, it's precisely this. Of course, V'zeh kol Adam is Lamed Zayin, also Mitzvah's Maisius. But the Rebbe's choice of V'zeh kol Adam, the second to last pasuk, we're ready. In other words, the last message that we have is Dafkid Limud HaTorah one.
Beautiful.
Again, you ask it and be wondering why it's like that when it's supposed to be Mitzvah's Maisius. But to your point, and to the point of the question of why the Rebbe is to us of Chavkas Nissen is the next Tazriyah Mitzayir is Limud Inan Gil Mashiach, is mamish. You see, the Rebbe's choice V'zeh kol Adam was Dafkid the Limud HaTorah one, because the Rebbe Hashem wants us to be to share with him. So it's you explained it very well, but I just wanted to tie that in with this verse.
Thank you.
Okay, Rabbi Marcus and Rabbi Levin, Tana de Messiah Lachem. I don't know if you hear me, I'm driving. Just to bring in a little starker relief and also to give you a clear marker. So was always bothered by this balance of Torah and mitzvahs in Tanya, and it seems like mitzvahs more than Torah. Also, to highlight what you were saying as far as mental health and all those other things, we know growing up, if you think about Dir for a second, the way it's depicted, then we're only an emtsai. We're a means to an end. Hashem needs a Dira, and He needs us to do it, so we do it for Him. But we're not the Iker, right? It's we're getting somewhere. We're the means to an end, and it's a little bit depressing when you know that you're just an emtsai. You're not the end itself. So I once saw in a mimer, and I asked Mashpim about this. Dir Toidim is brought, I think, 3 places in Medrash. One of the 3 places in Medrash that is brought, I think it's in Parshas Nosoi, and Nesavakash Baruch Hu, Lias Leis by Dir Toidim, Lishkoim bin Neshamas Yisrael. In other words, the Dir Toidim is in the Neshamas Yisrael, and that's like a mind-blowing thing. In other words, the whole Dir Toidim, the purpose of us doing it is through doing the avodah, through being Hashem's soldiers and everything, and having Mr. Snapish for Him. We're Megala that we're truly one with Hashem, and Hashem is His dear in B'Neshamas Yisrael. So it's like a whole different Dir B'Atoinim then, and it really speaks to everything you were speaking about, and that's especially clear in the Medrash.
Mm-hmm.
I asked 2 Mashpim. I said, this changes the game. Why doesn't it say this anywhere in Chassidus? I mean, this is like, because we all know Dir B'Atoinim. We don't the Lishka and B'Neshamas Yisrael is really not talked about too much. So I asked 2 Mashpim. I asked him Shalom Charatana. It's in a few sikhas. There's a sikha you mentioned. There's a sikha in the Parshat Kisavai. There's a sikha with Yaakov. I think in Miketz or maybe Vayesha, the same idea where the Rebbe highlights this very clearly.
Parshas Pekudei. Just now, Parshas Pekudei, the Chol Masehem is a very strong.
Fine, I don't know all the
end of the sikha, very strong on this Indian.
So there's a few sikhas that speak about it. There's a few places, but then a klal, Dir B'Atoinim. So I asked him, Shalom. He said, I said, why did it say in so little? It says like 5-10 places of Chassidus. This is the whole thing. It says in 5-10 places of Chassidus. It's more than enough. That was his answer. So that was one thing. Another mashpia told me, interesting thing, that maybe Chassidus doesn't want to highlight it too much because then we're doing it for ourselves. It's selfish a little bit, because we know that we're the tachlis. So there's more Mesiras Nefesh, and there's more bittul if it's just that we know that we're doing something for God and not for zich. Whatever, I don't know if that's so such a great answer.
Mendy, if I can comment on maybe a third answer to this question.
Okay.
So I think it's along the lines of the second mashpia, but I think it's taking it to a whole deeper level. Basically, you can't make a shechina, you can't make yourself a Dira B'Tachtonim if you're focused on yourself. The only way how you can become Lishkem B'Neshamas Yisrael is when you're focused on the Eibishter's Ratzon. Because you're so focused on fulfilling what he wants, you now became an extension of him.
Fine. So that's what he was saying.
In other words, in general in life, when you focus on yourself, you're building your ego, you're building yourself, you're getting in the way of yourself. When you're working on something outside of you, you're a changed person. I can give you many dogmoyas to this.
Fine. If I stay, that's what the second mashpia was saying.
Of course, Mandy. So of course, the Rebbe will primarily focus on Dira B'Tachtonim, but he'll let us know the real Nakuda, but the main Nakuda is Dira B'Tachtonim. It always goes back to that. But if you want to know the real thing, it's L'Shem Yisrael.
That's in like dinner, edle, bittul, tachsa, bittul. I think it's very heartening. It's very heartening and important to know that the tachas is Lishka B'Neshamas Yisrael. I did grapple with this for a while until I saw this Inyan, but definitely speaks to everything Rabbi Marcus was saying. And it's important to know from time to time that the Dir B'Atoinim is in us. And that explains the Torah mitzvahs balance, the skashrus. The skashrus is the main thing.
So I just want to add one thing here to Rabbi Levin, you mentioned Perek Lamed Gimel and Tanya. So I'm going out on a limb here on Perek Lamed Gimel and Tanya, but Alter Rebbe is trying to tell people, how telling the Beinani how he's supposed to be happy, how he's supposed to be besimcha, right? That's the whole thrust of that, where Alter Rebbe is at, and that's really Lam Vav, Lam Zayin. I mean, it's all the same thing. We're all trying to help this Beinani that he shouldn't feel so depressed that he's stuck in this this struggle with his nefesh habahamis and with his Yetzer Hara that he never gets out of. And so the Alter Rebbe is trying to make him feel better. And so in Perek Lamed Gimel, the Alter Rebbe starts off by saying, and he says that if you'll contemplate about the fact that the Eibishter is, and he goes into this whole Achdas Hashem, how everything is really one with the Eibishter, and so much one with the Eibishter that kula kame kolom mamish chashivi, right? He's mamalik kolam and seva kolam and kula kame kolom mamish chashivi. Which, by the way, just as an aside, in Perek Mem Aleph, where the Alter Rebbe talks about Yiras Hashem, he doesn't say. He says that you should consider to yourself how the Eibishter is Mamala Kalam, Seivu Kalam, and Imidalav. He doesn't say V'kula Kamei Kalam Mamish Chashivi. You would think that in Perek Mem Aleph, where he's trying to scare the wits out of you and say the Eibishter, he should tell you why you're such a nothing. This mamish are garnished. You're a big, giant nothing. You're a big zero. But he doesn't say it. In Perek Lamed Gimel, where he's trying to make you feel happy, he tells you, you should feel very, very happy. You should feel very, very happy because you're really a garnished. Mamish kula kame kalam mamish chassid. You're mamish like a nothing. You're mamish nothing. Mamish a big zero. And then he goes on to say that the Eibishter comes and he takes you from the dump, from the garbage heap, and he brings you into his house, into his apartment, and he mamish hugs you, and who's he hugging over here? He's hugging a zero. He's hearing a kula kame kalam mamish chashivi. I mean, how does that make me feel any better? How am I supposed to feel better when you tell me kula kame kalam mamish chashivi, and then you tell me that he's going to pick me up? He's picking up garnish. He's picking up garbage. He's picking up a nobody. And this is, by the way, something that we learn in Chassidus all the time, and it doesn't. It's like I don't know that people. Again, this is my understanding of what Kula Kamei Kalam Chashivi is. I'm just going to share with you, and how it's related to this idea of mental health and so on. So, what does it actually mean? Kula Kamei Kalam Chashivi. What does it mean? So the Eibishter created nothing. So what is he? We're just everything. In other words, on a lower level, your taka have some value, but if you go really to the Eibishter, you really mean nothing to him. I think that's a totally backwards way of understanding what Alter Rebbe is actually saying. What Alter Rebbe is saying is the opposite. Here you are, you're a Beinani, and you're getting stuck on the fact that you are not davening properly. You don't have Avas Hashem, you don't have Yiras Hashem. You're what you're offering to the Eibishter is actually very, very limited. As we say on Yom Kippur, mikrutze mata and whatever, all the different things that we say about ourselves. All the angels you don't want, but they just us, these people who can't put two words together. You want to hear our things. It's like we're mamish feel like nothing. We already feel like nothing. That's exactly what that Beinani feels like. He's never going to become a tzaddik. He never can overcome it. His whatever he's going to offer in Avodas Hashem is always going to be limited. Okay, so that's it. So here comes Oland Alter Rebbe and says, you're thinking about it wrong. You're thinking about yourself, how you're valuable to the Eibishter from a tachtoinim view. From a tachtoinim view, you taka have no value. But from the Eibishter's view, you have you're a segula. From the Eibishter's view, in the view of kula kame kalam mamash chashivi, he created you. He didn't create you from the lower level. It wasn't in a machshava a low down machshava that he decided to create you. He didn't decide to create you from bria. He didn't decide to create you from yitzira. He decided to create you from a place where nothing that you could possibly do matters. Because you are so valuable to him, nothing you can do could ruin it. Nothing. Zero. That's how valuable you are to the Eibishter. That's what Kula Kamei Kalam Mamish Chashivi means. That you think that you have to come to the Eibishter and you have to present him with something really, really great. No, just come yourself. You are valuable enough. Just bring your mitzvah, whatever mitzvah you do it. That's it. The Eibishter loves you from a place that no matter how great you will ever become, you'll never lose that special thing. So I'll give you an example like with children, right? When you have a baby, you love that baby because the baby has nothing to give you. You don't love the baby because of what the baby gives you. The baby gives you nothing. But then when the child gets older and they start giving something and they start taking also something, now already you start thinking about them in terms of their value. What's my return on investment? How much am I getting back from this child? How much is this child taking from me? And then you get lowered down to a lower level, and now you start to fight with the child. You keep the child out of your house. There's a whole drama going on. And then there's a moment where you wake up and realize, whoa, 1 second. He's my son. She's my daughter. This is my child. Remember how I love that child because they weren't giving me anything? Remember that? You loved that kid before they even did anything to you? Well, that hasn't changed. Nothing has changed. The fact that the kid became who knows what, and became a drug addict, and became a fried out or whatever it is, that nothing changed. Nothing changed. It's still the same child. Still the same. So from your perspective, if you can go back to that place where kula kame kolom mamash chashivi, where all of the future accomplishments are not what it's about. What it's about is your love of the child. Okay, then you're connected to the child unconditionally, and that's what the Alter Rebbe is saying in Perek Lamed Gimel. You can relax, Beinani, chill. Now he doesn't say that in Perek Memalef because there he's saying something totally different. Perek Memalef he's saying the Eibishter is depending on you. Now it's a very different word, and that's why Ava is from a distance and Yira is from close. But save that for another time. But the point being is the same. It goes back to the same point of mental health and so on. So it's the idea of unconditional acceptance. That's what the Eibishter has for us, and that's the idea of the Segula. That's the idea of all of these things. Thank you, Reverend Mendy, for inviting me on here. It's been a pleasure, and I hope it made some sense and hopefully inspired somebody.